Welcome to Guiding Families Forward Through Divorce.
Hey everyone, welcome into an all-new episode of Guiding Families Forward Through Divorce with attorney Ann Hamer. I'm your host, Mike Leon. And here's a family law attorney and the founding partner over at Hamer and Taylor with offices out in Memphis and in Nashville. And she's been working with families throughout the state of Tennessee, guiding them through divorce with discretion, strategy, and a strong focus on what matters the most, the kids. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about one of the most important aspects of divorce involving children, and that's creating parenting plans that truly work and put children first. Anne's going to explain all of it as she's helped so many families navigate this process. And it's so good to see you. I'm a byproduct of divorce, although I was a little bit older when my parents got divorced. So let me ask you at a high level, when parents are kind of facing divorce, how do you help the parents kind of shift a little bit from not only their own conflict, but to focus like on what I mentioned, which is a children first mindset, especially with the emotions running so high?
Mike, thanks for having me on the podcast today. It can be very difficult for parents because they're experiencing so much of their own stress during a divorce that it's hard sometimes for them to step away and see that the children are hurting too. Even though they're cognizant of it on some level, the parent is sometimes just hampered from actually putting the kind of attention and love into their child that they need to, because they don't have it for themselves. You know, their resources during a divorce or their emotional resources, mental health resources are strained. So one thing I always recommend with my clients, not just for them, but also for the kids, is if everyone can agree on therapy, then I think not only do the parents need to be in therapy, but the kids need to be in therapy as well. We've got just some fantastic therapists, both in the Nashville area and the Memphis area, who work with divorcing families. And having a good counselor in there can make all the difference, especially if the parents aren't either communicating, don't trust each other's communications when they do get them, just aren't able to continue to make parenting decisions. And maybe even as married people didn't make the best parenting decisions together or didn't co-parent well together married. So I always try to get a therapist involved right off the bat. It's just good for everybody, especially if there's going to be stress in the divorce process. And like you said, you were older when your parents got divorced. Sometimes kids roll with the punches and they just say, oh, all right, that's how it's going to be. We kind of saw this coming, mom and dad. No problem. Here's the parenting plan I want. Everybody respect me. Yep. Okay, we're good. But that's not the case the majority of the time, unfortunately. It's easy for me to relate to where my clients come from, and because I've been divorced myself. So, and I raised my children from 5th and 8th grade on as in a divorced family. So, and I think I co-parented pretty well with my ex. So I do relate to my clients, and we try to talk through what their hang up is, what the holdup is. And sometimes they just sort of get involved in a loop. And, you know, we talk about that a lot with mental health anyway. People get in a brain loop and they think, oh my gosh, what's going to happen here? What's going to happen there? Da, 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 da. And sometimes I can just calm them down and say, look, I've been where you are. We're going to take it step by step and let the kids start getting used to the new normal. You get used to the new normal. Not everything has to be decided today, but relating to them definitely helps. I think they feel like I've been there. And so I'm not just preaching at them. I've actually had to do it myself. And that helps. But again, I'm just going to rely back on a good therapist can go a long way in protecting the children in a divorce that's going to be a little bit difficult.
Yeah. Well, and the Leon family needed you back in 2002, but we'll move on from that in just a second, because it's funny. My sister, 6-7 years younger, she was part of the process of creating a parenting plan between my parents who were getting divorced and moving across different states. So let me ask you in that vein, what are some of the most common mistakes that you've seen parents kind of make when they're creating parenting plans during the divorce period?
The number one mistake I see my clients making is thinking that the parenting plan is going to solve it all, right? They want to put everything, the kitchen sink in there. And when you do that, there is some safety to that, especially if you feel like you don't co-parent well with your soon-to-be former spouse, but you tie your hands awfully tight. All our parenting plans in Tennessee allow for the parents to make new decisions together, but parents sometimes get into what I think is sort of a handicap position of, okay, well, let's just fall back on the parenting plan. That means I don't have to talk to you and you don't talk to me and we don't figure out Thanksgiving, even though this year that's going to be a little bit different because I've got extra family coming in. I think that's the biggest mistake. If you start putting in every single detail that you can possibly think of, you're narrowing down. I mean, you didn't parent like that when you were married, right? And you married this person and had children with them. So you can still parent with them. Of course, you don't want to have to talk to them every day about the small things, but you should be mature enough, and you need to develop the maturity if you don't already have it, to be able to call them and work through some of the issues that just don't need to be in writing. And you can get real hung up in the divorce process on getting that parenting plan just right. A lot of my parents seem to get hung up on how many times do I get a phone call? How long is that phone call going to be? What time is the phone call going to be? Those things, kids do want structure, but what they primarily want structure on is, where am I spending the night? Are my school uniforms or my football uniforms and my helmet over there? Will I be able to get to practice on time? Will I get to see my friends on the weekends? And what days am I doing those things with which parent? That's the major thing that the kids need. After that, all the little stuff, you need to work it out the way that it's in the best interest of your children. You need to be flexible. That's what I'd say.
And a second ago, you mentioned communication. A lot of the times, this, doing this kind of work, the high conflicts in these cases, communication breaks down, right? There's a lack of. How does a parenting plan, though, kind of reduce that friction between the parents, or does it create more?
No, a parenting plan is great for reducing friction, and it's why they were created in the first place. Back in the old days, the courts just put in orders, and they might or might not even really be the best thing for your family. Now, if our clients can make an agreement, it's always the best. And several of the key factors in a parenting plan: timing. What time do the children get picked up or dropped off, right? That just gets back to structure. Do you pick them up from school? Because if you do, you're reducing your exposure to your former spouse, which sometimes for some people is really good. It also gives the kid a transition, right? Because they're going, oh, okay, I saw dad this morning, Monday morning. Mom picks me up Monday afternoon after school. I've been in school all day. So it kind of gives them a time to just sort of decompress from which family they're going to be in at that next moment. It also gives everybody an idea of where is this exchange going to take place? Is it at school? Is it at mom's house this time? Is it at dad's house next time? Really helpful. And for my parents with out of state situations or two different cities, it's really helpful for everybody to know we're meeting at the Denny's off of I-65 or whatever it's going to be. So it's a nice place that's safe, that the children get used to. This is where we go. This is where we exchange. Just getting back to routine, structure, reducing their stress and reducing your stress, right? And figuring out where do you have to be when. And it's the same with the fall break, the spring break, the Christmas break. I have a lot of clients who look at parenting plans and think, wow, I'm going to really have to schedule. Yeah, you are. You have to get your calendar out and you have to look at your plan a lot and remember who has what holiday, who has what weekend. It's important to remember those things because you're the one making the plans, right? When my spring break, what do I want to do with my kids? Or do I not have spring break? Am I going to, go on a girls trip? So those are the things that I think the parenting plan gives everybody an idea for as long out as that plan is working for you on how your life with your kids and your ex is going to be structured.
Yeah. Well, I'm a Waffle House guy, but we'll move on from there in just a second.
Not a bad choice.
I did want to ask you, because you mentioned the courts and what they used to do. How do the courts nowadays in Tennessee, how do they view parenting plans? Like what are some factors that you've seen throughout your practice that tend to carry the most weight in these custody decisions?
So our courts used to be, and this was Memphis and Nashville both, used to be pretty conservative about father's parenting time. And fathers used to get, really in the early days, Friday through Sunday night. Then it kind of went on to Thursday. Everybody thought, ooh, maybe dad could do a little homework, right? And so then for a while, the traditional parenting plan was dads had Thursday through Monday morning at the start of school, every other weekend, and usually one night during the off week. and mom's got the rest of the time. In the last 15 years, I'd say that's changed. I mean, we have entire counties now that will just say, look, our default is a 50-50 plan if that's what dad wants. It is still the South. So there are still enough stay-at-home moms and dads with traveling jobs that not all of my men clients want a pure 50-50 plan or could do it even if they had it. And that can also involve, if they want it, they can get a nanny, they can make it work. But most of my clients will not push it that far. They want to be able to be with their child, and they recognize that if their child is going to be sitting with a nanny for 3 or 4 nights, might as well be with mom. So people have learned to know that they can expect 50-50 as the baseline, and they'll push back if they can or if they want to. But generally, that tends to be something now that, since 50-50 is so much more common, parties just sort of work it out. How does it really work for our family?
We talked about the children come first, but a lot of the times, and I was a little bit past the age because I was in my 20s when my parents got divorced, but you get a lot of the older children, 16, 17, they're going to have strong opinions about this. How do you kind of help parents kind of navigate those dynamics of the older child that's voicing their opinions while also staying within that legal framework?
That is one of the hardest struggles my clients face, and that I guess I have to face with them, and I have done it. Children in Tennessee at different ages get to a point where the judge will consider their testimony, and then they get to a point where the judge has to consider their testimony. So, for instance, if I've got a 16-year-old who's just adamant that they do not want to go to one of their parents, and I feel like that child's going to make a good witness, I can bring the child in and ask the court to listen to them. And my courts have traditionally said, yes, bring them in, even really 13 and up. I've had judges listen to 8-year-olds before. It doesn't mean the court has to do what the child says. And I definitely have judges who feel like they do not want what they call the dog wagging the tail. If the child doesn't want to go to the other parent, the parent they're with needs to get them in a car and make them go. And I've had judges threaten to send the kids into foster care before. So what I try to explain to my client, let's say my client's the one who is so concerned because the child doesn't want to go to the other party. And I just try to explain that that's the relationship the child's building with their other parent, right? At 16, you've got to let a child sort of navigate that on their own. They're getting to the point where they can say to the other parent, gosh, I hate it here, or I just want to stay in my room, or I'm going to always be out with my friends because you're making my life so miserable. Now, again, we talked about therapists a little bit. I tend to, if I'm going to court and I've got a child who does not want to be with a parent, it's going to be a lot easier for me to prove that to a judge if I've got a therapist backing me up saying, yes, this is not super healthy for this child. For whatever reason, this child doesn't like it. It doesn't feel good. And I don't think they should be forced to go. But I can tell you that generally my courts are going to say, this is what the parenting plan says. And until you turn 18, you're doing it.
Yeah. And I want to ask you about, we talked a little bit about the uncooperative child. Let's talk about the uncooperative parent in this, right? So in cases where there's one parent that's being difficult, uncooperative, what are some strategies you've employed that can kind of be built into the parenting plan, kind of get things back on track, or does the court intervene in that regard?
Both ways. I'm a big fan of trying to solve it yourself first. So, and also documentation. So you're going to need to be on an email or a text, and you're going to need to save those emails and texts where you can prove that the other parent is constantly, and sometimes it's real small, so you need a lot of emails and texts. But if one parent's constantly needling the other parent, or making things a little tough on the other parent, or not picking up on time, or not honoring the other parent's days, whatever it is, you've got to keep a record. That's the most important thing. But number two, give them some flexibility at first, because what I tell my clients, every single thing you put in writing could be, or say, right, could be recorded, and a judge could either see it or hear it. So when you're communicating with your co-parent, think of it that way. If you're talking about the kids, all that can come back up in court. So you always want to be as cordial as you can be, but then you want to stick to the parenting plan. And some of my people, and I bless their hearts, they're the ones who are, why can't we co-parent? She just won't co-parent with me. She won't discuss anything. They send these long texts and or emails, and the other person just responds with blah 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 blah, and you can tell that that's the marital dynamic, and now it's moving into a co-parenting dynamic, and one of them's just pulled back and said, I won't do it. And that's unfortunate. It's way better when the people can just pick up the phone, call, talk. It doesn't have to be your best friend anymore, but you just need to be able to just have a normal conversation. Not everybody can do it. And so when that goes on, I say just revert to the plan. The plan is it. And you focus on your relationship with your kids, not how well your co-partner or your co-parent is doing as a co-parent, right? Yeah. But eventually, if you've got a good record and it is a lengthy record and it is serious, then you want to go back to the court and say, this isn't working for our family and here's why.
Yeah, it's great advice. And as we put a bow on this episode, for the parent that's kind of maybe listening to you right now and they're still feeling a little overwhelmed, what are some reassurances that you would give them about creating this plan? It's going to truly support their children going forward.
Oh, it absolutely is. It's a process, but parenting plans were designed because things weren't working before, and because divorce was getting more and more prevalent, and because the parents were more likely sharing custody at a pretty decent, close 40, 60, 50, 50 level. That's a lot different than the old days when you might think a dad got to pick up on Friday, take you to a soccer game, have a great breakfast on Sunday morning and church and go home, right? Those days are way gone. So we need a lot of structure written in, but you got to be flexible also. And it is a process. So with my clients, I like them to start thinking about the parenting plan right away. You can, no matter what state you live in, I promise you there's one on your state website. So you can pull down the sample parenting plan, start looking at it, or call your lawyer and ask them, say, hey, go ahead and send me just a basic 50-50 parenting plan. I want to see what that looks like, how that's going to work for me. So we usually start walking our clients through that pretty early on. What does your parenting plan look like to you? What do you think your children want? What's your spouse willing to do? How's that work with your family, your job, her job, his job, whatever, the kids' jobs, the kids' schedules? Are there grandparents involved? Is there a nanny? These things. It's a process. And if you learn to trust the process of reading about it, learning about it, thinking about it, putting it in a framework of what your family needs and what that looks like, and then working with your attorney, and your spouse is doing it on the other side with theirs, hopefully, then eventually the two of you, 99% of the time, are going to come to the right plan for your family, and you're not going to need a court to intervene. That's the best result.
And thank you so much for the time, the insights, explaining this to the audience. I appreciate it as always.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
And thank you to everyone out there for listening to this installment of Guiding Families Forward Through Divorce. Look, if you're facing divorce in the state of Tennessee, you want some guidance on creating these parenting plans, navigating the process, do me a favor right now. Visit Ann and her team over at annhamerlaw.com. Before you go, do me one more favor. Hit like, subscribe, leave a review and comment, or share the episode with someone who needs to hear it. I'm Mike Leon. See everybody next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.